Now, where Barclays PLC reported that it will indeed sell its stake in Barclays Africa, and that announcement coming as ABSA released results this morning. Nompumelelo Siziba was at that results presentation. Nompu, good afternoon. Perhaps we should start with what Maria Ramos, the CEO, said about the sale in the Barclays stake of Barclays Africa. What were her words?
Thanks very much, Devin. I can barely hear you, but I think I got you. Look, Maria Ramos says that it doesn't really matter whether or not Barclays PLC owns 60% or 40% or 20% in Barclays Africa. She says that the strategy of Barclays Africa remains the same. It will continue to service its customers in the same way, some 12 million customers in 12 different countries. She says that, of course, Barclays Africa is going to begin to have conversations with Barclays PLC in London about the way forward. It seems as though Barclays PLC will divest of its shareholding over a period of 3 years. The two companies will need to talk around issues like branding. What sort of branding will Barclays Africa be able to maintain? Also systems, because they have similar systems. They'll need to talk about these various issues, all of which are contractual in nature. So regardless of whether Barclays PLC is invested in Barclays Africa, some things will remain pretty much unchanged, but they're going to have to talk about the details thereof. She says that she's also only recently found out the latest information because she's not part of Barclays PLC. It's an independent company which has made the decision, and now the conversation will begin as to where to next. She wasn't able to begin to speculate as to who might want to buy the Barclays PLC stake, but obviously she says at this stage it's early stages.
Results from ABSA now, a pretty good showing. I see 10% in ABSA locally, 17% jump in profits in Africa. Just tell us a little bit more about those results.
Thanks, Devin. Well, look, the bank, Barclays Africa, performed quite well. It reported headline earnings up by 10%. That's at 14.3 billion rand. It reported an increase in revenues on the rest of the African continent. Its target is to be able to achieve 20 to 25% revenue from the rest of Africa. It's now managed to get to about 21% in the 2015 year. In South Africa, revenue growth was a little bit pedestrian, well, not pedestrian, still above inflation, around 8%. It says that basically in terms of its retail and banking business, numbers are growing quite strongly. It talked about an increase of 855,000 customers during last year. So it's claiming really robust results. One metric that's very important for the banks is return on equity. It says that rose to 17%, whilst in South Africa, just the country South Africa, that rose to 18%. Their target is that for that to reach 18 to 20%, so they're nearly there. But Maria Ramos did concede that because of the difficult economic times that we're in, it might be slower to reach that return on equity. They managed to keep their costs down. Their costs were moving at a rate under the rate of inflation, and so she was saying these factors actually boded well in ensuring that they got good results. They have a 3-year strategy which they initiated in 2014, and she says that for the past 2 consecutive years they've been able to deliver on that.
All right, now just wondering finally, Nompu, where does this leave a planned acquisition of assets in Africa for the Barclays Africa Group? I believe there was some interest in Egypt, there was some interest in Zimbabwe. What now on those moves?
Well, Maria Ramos, speaking in relation to the Barclays PLC announcement today, she said Barclays Africa remains ever more committed to the African continent. And obviously part of that involves further acquisition. They did try to acquire assets in Zimbabwe and Egypt last year, but she says that they could not agree on a reasonable price in their view. And they're still looking to make those deals, but the price has to be right. It has to be value accretive, and it has to make sense for shareholders. There are certain rules now that are in place, international rules around Basel III and so on, whereby banks have to hold so much capital. And so she was saying that they have to balance all those things, the amount of capital that they hold and the kind of investments that they're going to make and the sort of returns that they should make to make it worth their while. Devon.
Well, thanks very much indeed. Nompumelelo Siziba there from the results presentation of Barclays Africa. Now, Barclays Purchasing Managers Index increased to 47.1% index points, or rather it's 47 index points in February. That's up from 43.5 in January.